course, there'll be more time if you have questions, absolutely. But sometimes it feels like if I explain a few things, sometimes your questions may be asked, and then of course there'll always be the opportunity. So we can do some question answers today, for instance, if you wanted to, especially since we went more into how this is practical, right? Okay. Now, how is this practical? Remember I told you about the lady, the serial killer, and of course we've understanding where she came from was very helpful. But then how about the next type of dependence, dependent arising or dependence on paths? Again, as part of the story, because the lady who accompanied her also said that she became really good friends with her, with the serial killer. Because, I mean, of course, she wasn't out to kill her, she couldn't do that. The one thing that she was in prison for, she couldn't do while she was in prison. There were guards around, and obviously she couldn't kill that lady. So there was no danger from that side. And she found out she had some really beautiful qualities. She had some nice qualities. I forget what they were, but there must have been something about her that when you got to know her, yeah, there was something beautiful. So the point is, again, everyone has that really. I mean, no one is naturally inherently bad. And it's very hard to believe that someone doesn't have any positive qualities. Obviously, when someone does something terrible, that terrible thing, they should be disciplined for that and so forth. But there are usually people that like them, who like this person or see some positive qualities. Unless they're total reclusives, like you don't even have any contact with anyone. But yeah, this is the problem, of course, if someone who's really nice and charming, and of course takes that as an opportunity to kill. So that's what they say about Ted Bundy. He was actually really charming. I don't know, does everyone know Ted Bundy? He just was one of America's earliest serial killer. Earliest in the sense that, well, at least that people are aware of. So he's quite famous. I think it was around the 70s that he was active. He was kind of well educated, he was good looking. I guess, yeah, people thought he was good looking. And he was really sweet and kind. And then he killed so many women in a very violent way. But he also had a terrible upbringing. His mom, well, he thought the person he thought to be his mom, his sister turned out to be his mom. She had given birth to him when she was so young that his grandparents raised him, and there was a lot of violence. His grandfather, who he thought was his father, as far as I remember, I don't remember the whole background, but there was a lot of violence. He was brought up with a lot of violence and a lot of neglect. However, he was able to fool people in thinking he was very well educated, and he did study psychology apparently at university, and so he wasn't stupid. And like he was driving around in a VW Beetle, so kind of like a cute car, and he was pretending he was injured and asked women to help him, that he was helpless, and they felt very safe around him because they thought it's an injured man, we need to help them. And the moment they helped him into his car, then he overpowered them, and then in the end killed them. Then he was captured once, and then he was able to escape, and then the second time he was actually executed. He was sentenced to death. But I remember reading about him once, that he was one of the first ones. Do you know Ted Bundy? Have you heard of him?
Yeah, I don't know his story that well.
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of people in the West know him as in, like, you know, you don't have to be a Ted Bundy, Sometimes people use that name in that way. But the point is, if it wasn't for that terrible lust of killing, I'm pretty sure if he didn't have that, he'd be an amiable, you know, reasonably nice person, right? And without the violence, etc. And in that way, we need to remember everyone has also positive sides. So they don't deserve to be hated for everything they are. Yeah. And again, it's not about them so much, it's about our own attitude towards them that really harms them, which doesn't mean they shouldn't be disciplined, by all means. Yeah. So if we meet someone at work, for instance, well, we only know them in a work environment. If they're our boss, if they're our colleague, we never get to know them in a different way. And if we don't like them, to at least allow the possibility for them to have good qualities, other qualities that we may actually like when we get to know them. And I'm sure we all have our fair share of experiences with people we initially got to know just one side of them, but then in a different situation, we saw there's a lot more to them. Yeah, so again, I don't know how that's helpful. Look at your own problems, your own difficulties, and see whether any of that could actually be a solution to the problem. Similarly, we could also look at not the people that are responsible for our difficulties, but for the difficulties themselves. Just the situation. Sometimes they're not caused by humans, they just arise. Is there a positive aspect? Can we look at it from a positive side? Maybe it makes us more compassionate when it comes to people having similar experiences, certain ailments that are debilitating. Now, if someone else has a similar ailment, maybe we have some advice. Maybe we found a way to deal with this effectively, so we could, especially nowadays with different forums and platforms, people exchanging ideas, you can possibly share your own experience and how you dealt with it with others. So your disease is actually the cause if you found a solution, right? I mean, I don't know whether it's dietary or it is to do with exercising or meditation, whatever it may be, you may actually help someone else to apply the same solution. And when you deal with this particular problem, now I'm just thinking of a physical ailment or a physical affliction, so if you think about that, I mean, if you have that problem, to look for a solution, also with the benefit of others in mind, that makes it much more powerful. So to think, okay, I need to deal with this. I want to deal with this not only to overcome this myself, or at the very least learn to live with this myself, but also for the benefit of others. And if I find a solution, then may I be able to help others in the same way. So you can use a problem, you can use a difficulty, use that difficulty, find a solution to this issue, or at least a solution not to totally overcome it, but to deal with it, and then make it public to others. I will make it public so that you share it with others. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't it be wonderful if my problem can become meaningful in a way that it helps others to deal with the same problem? And again, you see, dependence on paths means that every problem, every challenge we face, it has a negative side, but it also has a positive side. Does that make sense? And again, as I just said, yes, so find a way to deal with it. You know, that was also my difficulty when I studied. The thing was, as I told you, sometimes I wasn't allowed to do the same thing as the monks. So I remember one situation, I told you every year I would go down to South India to study, to continue studying at Drupal, together with my classmates. So that was fine. I had someone to travel with. They looked after me. They were very kind, with like a big group of people. So it was all fine. And then I would just go to the debate. I never even asked, can I or can I not? I just went. I never even doubted I could not go. Why not? I could go at the IBD. But then there was an official event where we all went. Like the nuns also have this event where you study something, all the nunneries get together. Now, likewise, the monasteries get together for that event. And so our institute also went there. They're kind of in the name of Drupal, so associated with Drupal, because of our teachers, our director, the founder of the institute being from there. And therefore, so we all went down, and this was more in an official capacity. This was more in an official way. And I was already told, when it's official, you have to ask for permission. And I knew this was important. Where our classmates, we were going to be there for some month. It was important in order for me to be able to continue with my classes. I mean, classes I could go to, but debate was an issue. So I didn't know, and I knew, okay, once you don't ask, but then also some other nuns, they had come there from Korea. There were two, I think, Korean or Taiwanese nuns, and they had asked for permission, and that's when they made the rule, no. At least not in that official kind of setting when all the monasteries came together, the monks from all the monasteries. So a nun debating, I didn't like that. And the nunneries were separate. I was the only nun in that situation of thousands of monks who wanted to debate with them. So they definitely didn't encourage the evening debate when the debate ground is pretty dark. But anyway, I had the right to have an audience with His Holiness. I had, at the IBD, you have the, at that time at least, it was possible to have a private audience, and I'd never asked for it. So I asked for my private audience, and I asked His Holiness whether he could give me permission that I attended the debate. And His Holiness said, I can't do that. That's not in my, I don't have the right to do it. The monasteries, they have their own way of doing things, so I cannot do that. I think it's good that you went to the debate. It would be really good if you could go, but unfortunately it's not, I don't have the capacity to allow you or forbid you for that matter. So therefore they have to make the decision. So there's nothing I could do. I had some other questions, and anyway, that was the main reason I asked. I went there. And then I went back to my teacher, I played him the recording, and he said, look, what you can do is go to the private office and say, His Holiness said it was a good idea if you go to the debate. Which I wasn't lying, right? I didn't say His Holiness said I cannot allow you that. I mean, it's not, I don't have the authority to allow you that. But I wasn't lying when it said in the letter. I gave them the recording. At that time it was Geshe Lakdola, he was His Holiness' translator. So I said to Geshe Lakdola, I gave him the recording, and what he wrote, what His Holiness said, he wrote down exactly that sentence. He was good friends with my teacher, so my teacher had previously, I guess, talked to him. And I got that letter. And with my letter, I went down to Drepung, I went to the abbot, and I said, this is what His Holiness said. And I said, okay, you can go to the session when it's still light, but you're not allowed to go in the evening. Okay, because it was kind of dark, and yeah, okay. But then I had to be creative. And I thought, well, really all I need is a debate partner. If I can't go to the debate ground, they can come to my room. So I had my classmates who had many friends down in Drepung, and I said, look, who can you recommend me to debate with? They gave me a list of names. I went to everyone's room and I said, can you come once a day, once a week, or once every 2 weeks? I don't remember how many they were employed. You know, just that 3 hours. It was only in 2 weeks, 3 hours, right? They had to do it twice. It didn't waste their time. And we were doing exactly that, debating with each other. So it was the same. I had to just think, what is the end result? What am I aiming for? To have that debate on a particular topic with a particular monk. And I chose the ones who are really good, actually. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you always need to debate someone who's really good, because sometimes those who answer in an absurd way, it's really challenging trying to disprove them. So it's not always, but yeah, I definitely had some recommendations, and I asked them to come, and they did. And that's how I solved it. So sometimes if we can't walk straight, we have to find a detour. But I really learned to be creative, that no matter what the obstacle, find a different way. And I had the monks who went to there was always like a huge kind of group debate, like everyone getting together and someone debating in the center and the rest. So if I had been to that place, I would have had to sit in the very back as a nun, and I wouldn't have heard much. But I got one of these monks to get the tape recorder and sit in the front. So they recorded it so I could at least listen to it, which is very, very helpful. So they recorded it, they turned I mean, still tapes, right? Turned around the thing, and I could listen to it. It was sometimes a little hard to hear, but it would have been hard to hear. It would be impossible to hear if I had actually been there. So you see, It's never good or bad. It's just a matter of not growing desperate, not giving up. Like really never give up. Never give up. If it's worthwhile, don't give up. Just find another way. And sometimes, yes, there are rocks in our way, there are boulders in our way, but we can find a way to walk around them, climb over them. I find that really to be true. I really learned from that. I learned from that. And especially in India, I mean, when I first came here, you couldn't just, when something broke, you couldn't right away throw it away and buy something new because it wasn't available. So fixing things and, finding other ways. I found people's creativity. I mean, a bucket. Who fixes a bucket with a hole? Well, they found ways to fix buckets. They had like this tar stuff. And my father thought that was great when he came to visit. Like, they just fix it. Incredible. We just throw it away and buy something new and add to the garbage, the tons of garbage. Here, I don't know now, but when I first came here, people had this tar kind of stuff and they would fix buckets and it was waterproof, so it was fine. Yeah. So, therefore, in life, I think this is a good lesson. I really found, I always try, I try not to grow desperate. Take a deep breath and try something else. Try again and just not give up. And sometimes, of course, I have to accept it's not going to work out. Unfortunately, but that's actually not that often. If I find it's important, yeah, there's always ways, and we have to be calm about it. And sometimes it's just, one karma is gone and then the next one comes. In German, or not just in German, I think also in English, they say like if one door closes, another opens, right? There's this saying. I find that really true. So one thing is over, something else starts. But again, more about dependence on parts, to be more talking about that. Like not just people have good qualities, as this woman, the serial killer, had some beautiful qualities that this person accompanying her found out. But secondly, a situation is like that as well. Something that seems negative, a disease, can help us to deal with it, like with the solution thing. Okay, we have a problem, we have an issue, and life is difficult now, but maybe you find the creativity to work with that. And if you've found a way to deal with that disease, with that illness, well, you can share it with others and their life become easier. So your disease has become very meaningful. And there are these platforms online now, fortunately for the internet. There are ways to share it. So any problem you have, if you find a creative solution, why not share it? So something bad is turned around and becomes something wonderful for the benefit of others. Actually, the problems we have, all the problems, the difficulties we have, are the times. Any time that is full of challenges that we would call a bad time is actually the most beneficial time for our spiritual growth. It seems to be contradictory when we want to overcome suffering, but say the times when we suffer are the best for us for our spiritual growth. So you're accepting suffering in order to overcome suffering, in other words, or you utilize suffering in order to overcome suffering. Why is that? Because first of all, when everything runs smoothly, we become complacent. We seek again happiness in samsara. We have that innate wish to find happiness, lasting happiness and satisfaction. And since we all only know samsara, when things go well, we're fooled to think there's real lasting happiness. We become very attached to everything running smoothly. Therefore, it's much harder when things change. But we also have a very unrealistic view of what samsara is like. We don't want to practice the Dharma. We don't want to meditate. We just want to enjoy. And you know what we do? We exhaust the positive karma. that we've accumulated to have these experiences. Because why do we have these positive experiences? Because we created the causes for that. And the more you enjoy, just enjoy these beautiful states without accumulating new virtue, the more exhausted. It's like you've saved money in the bank, and then without any backup plan, you just spend it. So from a Buddhist point of view, actually some of the practitioners say, I don't want to have too much comfort and pleasure, because if I experience a lot of comfort and pleasure, my positive karma will be exhausted. And they often don't seek too much comfort. If they have too much comfort in their, like for instance, I mean the kerosene stove thing. I mean in my case it was just I wasn't able to take it the right way. But the meditators, they have very simple accommodations because they truly believe if I'm too comfortable, I won't be motivated to practice. If life is a little harder, then I'm more motivated to practice. For us, it's the other way around. Unless I find a perfect retreat hut with the perfect food, with the perfect silence, with the perfect scenery, with the perfect temperature, no, I'm not going to practice. Right? Again, not really understanding cause and effect. It goes back to not understanding cause and effect. Our pleasures, the pleasures we created, are the result of actions in the past. If I just enjoy, I don't know how long they last. I mean, it's possible that if I just enjoy, and that may even, I mean, even just without karma, if you just only want to be comfortable, you're not going to exercise. If you just want to be comfortable, you're going to eat comfort food, which is known to not be green veggies and salad necessarily, depends on who you are, but usually it's not really like healthy food. And just in terms of, what's the word? Common, I used it this morning. Never mind. What's the word? Funny, I have some difficulty finding words. It's just logical. It's just logical. You don't need Buddhist logic. Common sense, that's it. It's just logical or common sense. If we just enjoy and we just seek, it's actually not good for us. Only seeking comfort. So this is true in everyday life from a point of view of common sense, but even from the point of view of karma, from the point of view of the law of karma. We need to accumulate the causes and conditions for that. Of course, if you enjoy with the benefit of your with the motivation for the benefit of all sentient beings, and I sleep 10 hours every day or 12 or whatever, but I rejoice in the virtue of everyone else, okay, you're likely to accumulate some positive karma here with rejoicing. But usually our mind is too distracted to do that. So you're not required to undergo hardship, not at all. If you're disciplined enough to be comfortable, but to have the right kind of motivation and to rejoice in everyone else. So this rejoicing is really important. It's a trick. Always rejoice. That's why you have a lot of practices, a lot of prayers that contain the practice of rejoicing. Right? Just be so happy that there are these great beings that practice so hard just to rejoice in that. You accumulate virtue yourself or merit yourself, right? Therefore, that's considered to be a very effective practice. But I'm saying, in general, it's important, nevertheless, to not exhaust too much of our positive karma and to be sure to replenish it, to replace it, okay? But we have this tendency, yes, we want to just be happy. I mentioned this many times, like with the meditation. For us, a good meditation is when we're totally blissed out. That's not a good meditation. It sounds like we've just fallen asleep. No, I'm kidding. Of course, it's not always like that. There are meditations definitely when you can be blissful. Why not? But it's hard to say whether it's good or not. It could just be a waste of time, or it could be some breakthrough. But usually people get attached to that. If next time you sit down and expect the same thing and it doesn't happen, you may be discouraged from doing it again. Therefore, don't be attached. Just whatever happens is fine. Just making the effort is fine. And if you feel miserable and if you feel unhappy, stuff comes up, good. Good. Again, it's good. If you go to therapy and things come up and suddenly emotions come up or fear or whatever, that's seen as progress, isn't it? So why would it be different here? We're accessing the same depth of our subconscious. We're allowing through mindfulness and so forth, we do the same thing. So great. It's like short-term suffering. It's like going to the dentist, right? I mean, when we go to the dentist, we don't expect, or when we have our teeth cleaned, for instance, like in Germany, that's a big thing now, you have your teeth cleaned. I don't like it. You know, my mom makes me go, and I'm glad she does, so I do go now in Germany. Have my teeth cleaned. It's not comfortable, but it's good for me. I don't like it, but it's good for me. Therefore, short-term problems, long-term benefit. Meditation. You know, I don't always like to sit down or do my practice, for instance. I mean, practice when it comes to that. But short-term discomfort, long-term benefit. So it's a bit like that. Yes. So therefore, dependence on paths, first of all, look at the positive. Try to find the positive. There always is, because it doesn't depend on what happens. It doesn't exist from the side of the object. Going back to emptiness. From the side of the object, it's neither positive nor negative. It depends on how we look at it. Depends on our own mind. Challenge or difficult, right? Challenge or stressful. It's neither, therefore, it's up to our own mind. Yeah. Of course, even something virtuous or non-virtuous, depending on what we want, it becomes good or bad. It's just in relation to that. But we can change what we want. Do I always need comfort? Do I always need to feel blissed out? No, it's okay. So then, I'm even okay with a meditation that scares me. Again, remember fear? Fear is a problem in the 21st century. Loneliness is one. So this morning we talked about loneliness, and the solution of loneliness is actually quite simple. Quite simple. What did I say this morning about loneliness? You feel close towards others. Oftentimes we expect others first to show us appreciation, show us their love, and then we feel close towards them. But if they don't show that love towards us, if they don't show us, they don't like us, if we feel they don't like us, we can't like them, and we create that distance. But if right from the beginning we just have love and compassion for them, no matter what, even if they're just happy without me, then I can be so happy. It's a bit like a mother who's just happy that her children are happy, whether she's included, you know. It's not like you're expecting them to drag you along on Saturday evening when you go partying. Who goes partying on Saturday? This is how I grew up. Friday evening and Saturday evening. Oh, Friday evening and Saturday evening you go out with your friends, right? So I didn't take my mom along. No way I would have taken my mom along. But you know, my mom was happy when she knew we were safe and we were happy. And she was happy for us. I mean, I wasn't going to do this for weeks on end. It was like Friday and Saturday. And it was quite funny. I was so wanted to go out and party. I wanted to party when I was like 14, 15, 16. I wanted to party. And my parents were actually very strict initially. Very strict. I had to always be home the earliest. And there was so much conflict at home because I had some friends who could do so much. And I couldn't. And I was like, please, an hour longer, please. And they were just innocent parties, you know. We had like juice and chips and, you know, we danced blues, you know, like he over there and me over there, and we were just dancing. It was nothing. It was totally innocent, honestly, you know. But our parents were like, no, not too long. Don't do it too much. And actually, alcohol came into play. But I only was drunk once. And I was so drunk, I don't remember what I did. I mean, I was so drunk, I didn't do anything I was told, but I just threw up, and I never wanted to experience that again. It was disgusting. So that was the good thing. I didn't like it. That was really awful. I was so sick. So alcohol wasn't a problem. But I really wanted so much to party. And when I was 16, my parents, I don't know where they got that from, they said, from now on you can do whatever you want. You can stay out all night and it's okay. Some psychologists, thank you, they must have read something. I have no idea. I never asked where that came from. When I was 16, they told me, you can do whatever you want in terms of partying. I did it only once. One time I partied until 4 in the morning, and then it was boring. Then there was no more, it wasn't forbidden. And at some point I got really bored of partying, you know, it's like, ugh. You know, you drink, but I didn't like the drinking part. So I drank a little bit, but I don't like beer. So I put in more Fanta than anything else, so it was sweet enough. And I didn't like to get drunk. I really wanted to smoke. I tried, but it didn't agree with me. So it was so cool. I practiced actually smoking, but I didn't really like it because, you know, it was cool. All the girls, they smoked. There was Marlboro Man was everywhere, you know, that was before they stopped doing that. There was the Marlboro Man, he looked so cool, and there were all these cool actresses and actors. So yeah, so I tried, I really tried, but it made me, I always got a sore throat, so that didn't agree with me. And eventually I thought parties were so boring. And when I didn't feel the peer pressure any longer, then I didn't go. But I had to go through it. And I did it. I did it for some time, but it was always the forbidden fruit. When it was forbidden, I wanted it. When it was allowed, so I was quite grateful in the end. But my parents were actually they were happy with me now, not doing anything that was forbidden. So the point is, therefore, to overcome that loneliness, to be happy for the people who are doing well together, and just have that love, that unconditional love, whether they love you back or not. That's the solution to loneliness. It works. It really works, because I felt so miserably lonely for so long. And when I started doing that, every time I felt lonely, I tried to generate just that love for all sentient beings. And it's fake, but I could do it for some time until the loneliness was gone, and then I just enjoyed what I was doing. And also practice rejoicing in what they are doing. Rejoicing in what they are doing. And I remember one of the reasons I felt very lonely was because my classmates, they always had many, many different friends. So even not just were there together all the time, they always had people from the same area in Tibet. And there was no one from my area, and I didn't have the time to really get to know people from other countries that I felt closer to, like with a similar background. And I could see my classmates, they were always had people, like they had to go to hospital, there were always so many people going with them. And I thought, oh, and I'm always alone, right? Poor me. And here I am. And really, I felt so sorry for myself. And I could see my classmates have that. And so I said to them once, I said, you're so lucky. You have all these people that come from your area, and you don't feel like in a country that you don't understand, a different culture. And I said, well, you're lucky you don't have that many people from your... Because the moment someone arrives newly from Tibet, we have to look after them. We have to do everything. We have to take them to hospital. We have to... And I was like, oh, I never thought about it that way. Wow, that was such an eye-opener. And I was so glad then, because they couldn't do the things. Oftentimes, if someone came from Tibet, they needed help. It was seen as their duty. Of course, they also received help back. But oftentimes, they said the help they've received back was not the same as like having to help them, because they already lived here, they knew everything, and they were called in the middle of something they didn't want to go, and they had to do it. And I realized it's not as black and white, that this is 100% good, and it just depends. And I never envied them for that again. So therefore, it's just getting a fuller picture. Don't see things just from your perspective. if you really look at it, if you wanted that really, if you had all these friends and you knew lots of people, well then, in order to you have to upkeep these friendships. You can't just ignore them and expect that they will always be your friend. You have to also give something from your side. Do you really want to do that? I mean, usually we have one great friend who we know well and we spend time with them and that's lovely. But do we need that many that we spend very superficial time with just to say I have all these friends on Facebook or whatever, right? That is not really. So anything you want, anything you want so badly, think again. Is this really going to bring you happiness? Visualize you achieved it already, and then think, is it really going to make you happy? And actually, that's not true. Because it doesn't depend. Happiness doesn't depend on achieving this, that, and the other. You want a pay raise. You know, it's like when you work, you want a better paid position. But that may make more pressure, give you more pressure, mean more work, more responsibility. Right? It usually has a disadvantage. And then more money, and what are you going to do with all this money? So you have to spend it, you have more stuff, you have to look after the stuff. Because the more stuff you buy, the bigger the place you need, the more to clean, the more security you need, that it doesn't get stolen. And then if it breaks, you have to work harder to replace it. I mean, is that happiness or is that dependence? I mean, nowadays, if I look in the West, people work so hard because they go shopping. So they want shopping. They buy new things and they feel good. You know, you feel good. You've got something new. You feel good. All right, great. And then you feel good, so you want to feel good again, so you buy something else. And then you buy more. But then, now, you have to look after all these things. And you have to, first you spend a lot of time shopping. So all your time is spent on shopping. Then you spend all your time looking after the stuff you bought. And in order to be able to upkeep it, you have to spend all the time working to be able to, so there's not much time left. That's why people are so busy buying things all the time. Like my sister, she's about Amazon. Like, I don't think there's any delivery agent who doesn't know my sister. They know where my sister lives, so they you know, like, I see delivery vans all the time. But then she doesn't order the right thing, then she has to return it. So it's supposed to be faster, but returning it and packing it, and it seems like she spent more time just dealing with the stuff she's sending back, and then they sent her the wrong thing, and then she has to blah, 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 blah. I don't know whether her life is that much easier. And she buys and buys, and they have like a garage with 2 cars, but the cars never fit into the garage. The cars are always outside because the garage is so full with all the stuff that doesn't fit into the rest of their house. So they bought another holiday house somewhere else, but that's full now. Now they have a shed that's full. They need to buy a new shed now. So they have already 3 sheds. They started with 1. So it's like, it's crazy. I can see every year more sheds, full of, like, more shelves in the garage. How many bicycles are standing around? But she's too busy to sort out through all this stuff because she's busy buying new stuff. Right? And she's got a guest room, but she can't invite a guest because the guest room is full. It's so full. And then she thinks, I don't want to waste it, I'm going to sell it. So she's so busy selling stuff on eBay, right? Sending back and forth, and you know, and then she has to pack it and send it to them, and then it comes back, and she has to, because they didn't like it, and then she has to sell it again. And in the end, she can't work as much because she, you know, she's so busy selling all this stuff, so she has to make up for the work to be able to get the money to buy more. And then she has to buy new spots and new sheds. I don't know whether that's happiness. Right? And then when she goes for a vacation, someone needs to look after the stuff, because it could get stolen. Right? Selling it on eBay is one thing, but have it stolen? No way. I mean, that, and I didn't exaggerate. I wish I did. But what I just said, I mean, oftentimes I exaggerate, but this was not an exaggeration. I mean, this is really true. Every year, One more shed, little huts, you know, you can, plastic kind of sheds outside in the, yeah. Incredible. Yeah. Anyway, and she's not the only one. She's just one of millions. Yeah. So we're slaves to the things that we think make us happy. We're total slaves. We enslave ourselves to all our possessions. Right? And there's nothing wrong with possessions. There is a limit. We should own certain things to give us enough time to do certain things. Of course, I'm not saying give everything away, because then you're going to be so busy. I mean, just if you don't have a bucket to bring water, you're going to carry it in your hands, and that's going to take much longer. So no, by all means, get a bucket. But also be realistic. How far does it make life easier? Or and when does it start? When do I start spending more time just because I got too much stuff? Okay, so having said all that, now we're a little bit off when it comes to dependence on parts, yes. But still it's correlated. You can see how it's correlated. Okay, then there's dependence on labeling. There's dependence on labeling. Now, I know that in India, in particular in India, but this is not just true for India, there is an automatic feeling of closeness when you know you're related, right? Is that right? You know it's your cousin. No matter who they are, this person is your cousin. There's some kind of love there. Sibling anyway. Sibling. Maybe not cousin, but sibling. And it depends on your background, depends on everything. And I actually feel similar, because my cousins, I never really had that much contact with them, because they lived somewhere else, and the generation of my parents, we didn't spend that much time with relatives, only on few occasions, you know. When my grandmother was still around, that's when we got together. But I always felt my cousin. I felt like somehow we were specially connected. And I did care for them, even though I didn't know them. So there's a different feeling there. And with this serial killer, again, the lady who accompanied her, I think she talked about a cousin or something, who still felt that bond. Or a sister, maybe it was a sister, that's right. There was a sister. There was a sister that she took care of when she was tortured together with her sister. So they had only each other. That's right, they had each other. So first of all, the sister felt grateful and she saw the beautiful side of her, but there was also the feeling, this is my sister, she's the only person I have. So labeling sister already made the difference. Now, if you had a sister who was a serial killer, you probably would still feel a closeness towards that person, wouldn't you? A sister, maybe even your father turned out. And there are stories like that, of course, you know, like, I don't know, in India, I'm not sure, but I heard, like, in Germany, there was once a guy, he went out at night to kill people, and during the day, he was, just a father to his kids, and his kids had no idea that he was actually killing people. So, but then after he was caught and he was put in prison, their children, they spoke up. They said, he's still my father. I loved him for being a father. I loved him for what he did. So I think it's terrible. I'm so upset what he did to these people. That's so horrible. But I still love him as this person who's my father. He's my dad. Or the Nazis, right? The Nazis. My grandfather was a Nazi. And my father and his siblings, you know, my father, I was very, very lucky to have a grandfather who's a Nazi. You know why? Because he was never at home. He was so busy being a Nazi that he was never at home, and he was this very strict authority. He was also kind in many ways. My aunts and my father used to tell us, but he was also very strict. He had that old ways of disciplining children. Whereas my grandmother and her mother, who lived now with the children, there were 6 children, and then the grandmother and the mother, they were just women, they're very gentle. So they didn't educate, especially the boys, to be tough and to not show their feeling. So my father is the gentlest soul in the world. He never had a problem showing his feelings and talking about how he felt. So he was my favorite person in the world. Always has been. Now it's been difficult communicating, but when I grew up, my father was my hero. My father was my everything. Because he was so understanding and so kind. And I think because his father wasn't there, and his mom and his grandmother did such a great job to take care of him. So they never lacked in anything. And when my grandfather, after the war, he was tried in Nuremberg, when they had all the trials, and he was imprisoned. He was imprisoned for 6-7 years. And then I said to you, he was released from prison to be part of the new government because they had only Nazis. So except for Adenauer, the chancellor, who was like the president, he was the only person who was not a Nazi. Everyone else was, because they were the only one who knew how to run a country. But because of the hardships in prison, he had become ill with cancer and didn't live very long. So my father was 14, his father passed away. And of course he was sad, and they were all sad. But I'm thinking, in a way, it was good for them, because they grew up with these gentle women who could educate him in such a way that they all became amazing, except my oldest uncle. He was still a Nazi. My oldest uncle went to the Hitler Youth. The influence of his mom and his grandmother wasn't that bad. And though they were also Nazis, my grandmother, but she never talked about it with her kids. She didn't influence them in that way. So that was not part of their upbringing, which was good. Only my oldest uncle, he had these views. He was a little difficult. But he passed away when I was very young, so I never got to know him really. So the point is, it was terrible on one hand, but on the other hand, something good came from it, and my father loved his father. Because he was never there, but he was his father. He didn't really know what he had done because it was kept secret. And he still loved his father. And if you hate your father, it really harms you. It really harms you. That hatred, it harms you. Because our parents are the most powerful objects of accumulating merit. Our teachers, most importantly, but our parents are very powerful because they gave us life. They gave us this life. And that sounds very old-fashioned, but if someone gives us a lot, if we can somehow repay that kindness to a certain degree, even though they were not good parents in their conventional way, but at least they gave us life. And it's said to be, our parents are said to be very powerful objects of accumulating merit. And so hating them actually harms us a lot. We're basically hating for us to be alive kind of indirectly because of those who gave us life. So first of all, it's not always negative, but that hatred also, the closest connection we have, even biologically, it harms us. So you see, with my dad, having a father such, being a Nazi, and still he loved him, and he benefited from his absence, and it didn't harm him in any way. I don't think my father was in any way, and also his siblings, they're all amazing. He has 4 siblings, they were all amazing, except for this older one. He was difficult. Yeah, he was quite difficult. But anyway, so you see, like what we call someone, how we label someone, father, brother, just that is enough sometimes just. So fellow human being, previous father, previous, and again, we have that bond, right? Think of the person you hate the most. Well, ex-husband, ex-child, ex-parent. I mean, even sometimes an ex is still something important, right? I mean, people still feel, like we use the word ex as in like ex-husband, ex-wife, right? And we still feel there's a connection, although it's over. So then ex-parents, ex-father, ex-mother. Does that make sense? So even the way we label things, ex-mother, ex-father, that's a powerful label. And that's still true. I could, ex, everyone is an ex. Everyone is an ex. an ex-lover, an ex-child, and just focusing on the positive in that way, it's really helpful. So just how we label. Now, this is not how labeling is usually used, but it's not like what you find in the texts that they talk about everyone was an ex. But it's true, especially in the 21st century where ex this, ex that, is still, it creates, how we describe relationships with people. Oh, he's my ex. We actually say he's my ex. That means like ex-husband or ex-wife usually, right? Isn't that beautiful? Ex-child, ex-mother, ex-father, everyone. So in a way, we have these relationships. We were once related, right? And since being related feels so important, well, ex-relative should be maybe not equally important, but should still be important. And one relative, like a relative of this, is just the relative of this lifetime. But we have so many ex-relatives. And there have been so many times our ex-relatives, right? In this lifetime, they're just once our relative. But there's so many times they were our ex-relatives, so it's pretty equal, isn't it? They should be as close to us as an actual relative. Am I making sense? I'm stretching it a little bit, but it's not unrealistic, is it? So therefore, thinking once again, the people we have a hard time with, it's always like that, like all sentient beings, okay, except such and such, right? Isn't there someone who we don't want to include? The stranger, no problem. Those we feel close to, no problem. But the ones the ones who don't like us or the ones we don't like, what about them? We wish we could just ignore them. But they're the ones in our visualization. I did it once and then I didn't, but we can do it again for our visualization. They should be put in front of us because they are the hardest to include in our compassion. So, causes and conditions. What made them who they are? Qualities that we haven't discovered yet. So first, dependence on causes and conditions. There were causes and conditions. When they were born, they didn't have any of that. They were born as beautiful kids. Think of the person you hate the most, and you were to now hold them as they were children. Do you have the same perception of them? No. You could love them. If they were your child, you could learn to love them as the most important person in the world. Right? Very different. So if we had known them then, but we weren't their parents at that time, and whatever happened, it turned them in who they were, and they became. Tendencies in the past, of course, but tendencies are just that, tendencies. No one is born as a serial killer. I don't think there's ever been a murder by one twin murdering the second one purposely, right? Have you ever heard, like two twins in the womb? Don't like that one. I don't think it's ever happened, right? It's impossible. You don't have murder embryos, embryos who are murderous. I mean, they may push each other and kick each other, sure, but someone going out of the way, great. In fact, they would probably both die anyway. So you see, no one is born as a serial killer. Causes and conditions create them into that, or whatever. I mean, it's not like we hate so many serial killers, but I'm saying anyone that we really dislike, no one was born in that way. Everyone became that way. So it's the causes and conditions. And do I know for certain, can I say for certain, that I would have not become like them had I experienced the same from childhood onwards? And usually our self-confidence, when we think about that, goes down. Oh, maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. So then it allows already for our heart to be a little softer and not to be that resentful. And then to reflect on the positive sides. Kind of give it some time or talk to other people who like them. Sometimes when we resent someone badly and we can't see anything positive, we may just ask someone else and say, oh, you're good friends with so-and-so. I've heard they have some really good qualities or something, I don't know how you start the conversation, but like, tell me more about them or something. You know, what do you like about them? And then before long you go, oh, I never knew that. That's cute, right? Oh, that's really nice when they're time off. Like if it's your colleague, when they're time off, they're at work for old people or they look after the people living on the streets. Imagine, you know, a jerk in the office, but a very kind person, like looking after stray dogs or looking after people who are homeless and giving them food. And isn't that touching? Sometimes we just don't know. We just see them in the office. So finding out about their good quality. And then remember, they're all exes. Ex this, ex that. Yeah. And the problem is because we see only the negative side, we label them in a particular negative way. And then that's all there is. My mom is so funny. There is a lady, she's my stepmom's friend. My stepmom's friend. And through my stepma, I got to know her. She's the same age as her, but she's very sweet, she's very kind, and she likes me, I like her, and every now and then I go to see her. Once when I'm there, I go to see her. But my mom doesn't like her because she once spoke bad about my mom. Once. And I asked my mom, are you sure she said that? She's not even sure. So she said something about my mom years ago. I mean, this is literally 30 years ago, if not longer. Maybe that was before I became a nun. She talked bad about my mom. And since that time, when I go to see her, or once we all have dinner together, and she's like, I don't like her. She once said so-and-so. And I'm like, Mom, this is so long ago. So for her, this lady, whenever she labeled, it's the lady who talked bad about me. That's it. That's the label she uses, the lady who talked bad about me. And the funny thing is, in the last few years, when it became more and more absurd that she's still holding on to it, I said one day, are you really sure she said that? Were you there? She said, no, someone told me. And I said, but can you be sure that they didn't lie to you or it was not someone else? And she was like, well, not 100%. Anyway, she's really into this, and I'm not sure she's going to give it up ever. But it's just so funny how you see, and I'm pretty sure I do the same thing, but I'm more aware of it when other people do it, that we have one person, we have one or two encounters with them, and every time we think of them, we can only think of that one situation with them. They're no longer like that, but we've defined them. For us, their definition, like our sense of who they are, it's okay. We define them based on that experience, right? And that's so limited. It's so just in our mind. The person is no longer there, right? And we believe it's intrinsic in them, and that's all that this person is about. Nothing else about this person. They talk bad about me. End of story. Isn't that fascinating? But you see, I notice it with my mom, but not so much with myself. So here, self-reflection comes in again. When we look at our relationships with other people, especially when we have a hard time, are we just fixated on that one event we had with them that was maybe negative and cannot see them in any other way because we keep labeling gossiper or whatever else, right? Gossip about me kind of person. Yeah. It's so interesting how most of it's nothing to do with reality. We label and believe that to be inherently in that person. And because it's so concrete, it cannot change. If it existed inherently as that negative quality, it couldn't change. So that's why to us it seems they're still like that. So we hold on to permanence. Does that make sense? It's pretty crazy. This is pretty crazy. So you see how this is applied, how you can apply this weird, I shouldn't say weird, but this very technical issue, like the dependent arising. The words can be classified into 3 types, causes and conditions, what are causes, what are conditions. So it seems very, very technical. But once we understand it, It's totally practical. It's part of our everyday life, and not understanding is why we have so many problems. You see how this is helpful in that way? Okay, great. All right, so this is a little bit about how we can apply this in our daily life. And of course, let's go back to selflessness. Let's go back to emptiness. All right, if you don't mind. Okay, because we still need to deal with how the I exists. We've dealt a lot more with other people now, with our relationships with others. So you may be surprised that when we talk about no self, and again, just to remind you, it doesn't mean that there is no self. Oh my God, what I just said. No self exists, but it doesn't mean there's no self. Huh? No, they try to emphasize no self, no self, no self, because we so strongly believe in it. I guess it's just to emphasize it, to then let us know, of course, don't think there's no self at all. But when we use the word selflessness in Buddhism, which of course means in everyday life means to be selfless, means to be altruistic, basically, or not being selfish. Here it means something slightly different. Selfless means no self. You'd be surprised that there are different levels to understanding that there is no self. I haven't gone into these levels yet. I felt it was too technical, but now maybe it's a time to use some of the technical terminology. Does anyone know what are coarser types of selflessness? Are you aware of any type of coarser selflessness? Have you ever heard philosophically? What are they?
Military substantial, autonomous substantial.
Okay, I kind of call it, I use it by different words, permanent, partless, independent. Okay, now, this is a very interesting principle. In India, traditionally, right, in India, when the Buddha, before the Buddha arrived, before the Buddha was born, before the Buddha taught the Dharma, there was already a very sophisticated philosophy of what the self is. I guess in no other country, especially at that time, was the self, and in no other culture, was the self so important than it was in India. Like, what is the I? There were a lot of very sophisticated systems that very much analyze what is the self. If we use I, right, then what is that self? What is the I? Right? Atman. There's a lot of explanation of the Atman, the self. So if you have a system that says there is no self, a system that has a very clear definition of what the self is very helpful. Well, first of all, if you deny the self that they posit, then what is to be negated is very clear. Or if this particular philosophical system clearly lays out the self that does exist, it's so much easier to understand which one doesn't and which one does. Right? So in a way, before the Buddha came, there were many philosophical systems like the Samkhya's, what else? The Nigatayamis or something? I can't get. Nigrantas. Oh yeah, that's what they're called. The Shravakas, yes. Charvakas, yes. Oh, the Charvakas, that's right. The Charvakas. Oh, I love the Charvakas. I love the Charvakas. The hedonists. Because in the 21st century, in the West, everyone is the Charvaka. Not everyone, I'm kidding. But there are a lot of Charvakas. So when we learn about Buddhism, we learn about these philosophers. Because Buddha taught in the context of these philosophers, and many of the teachings were given according to their needs, according to their understanding. And to understand the way Buddhism was taught 2,600 years ago, that is to understand the traditional way which it is taught, which it is still taught nowadays, that is made easier if you learn the non-Buddhist systems. To understand how they were thinking. And you don't need to study in much detail about them, But I studied them, and I really liked studying about them. Because learning the Buddhist view, what they deny, what they refute, first I understood what exactly it is they're refuting with the non-Buddhist views, right? First getting a sense, this is why the Buddhas emphasize this so much. But not just that, finding that I agree with the non-Buddhists. Thinking, I also have that kind of belief. Oh my God, I never knew that was not realistic. Right? I find myself, it's explained really beautifully. Okay, so for instance, the idea that there are universals. Okay, so table, like there's the individual table, and there must be some table, some overarching kind of table. I had that sense there was, until I met Buddhism, and there was like, no, where would that be? That's like numbers in space. Oh, okay. Oh, should we take it? Oh, okay. All right, we have a little bit more time. Yeah, sorry, I need to, count. Okay. So, like with numbers, I mean, when I was younger, if someone had told me, numbers exist somewhere in space and then we utilize them, that would have made sense to me. Especially with the kind of Greek philosophy that is that's the background of Western culture. Not surprised, the Platonic, I think it's called the Platonic view of numbers. So, no surprise. But then in Buddhism, that's very much denied. There's a lot of emphasis on that when you study logic. There's not like this overarching, separate tableness somewhere in space that every object has in common, that exists within each object. Right? It's this idea, we call it a table because there's a tableness that is part of this universal table. Does that make sense? In some philosophies, you also find this idea, there's this universal mind. And we have a little bit of that universal mind. Everyone has a little bit of that. And once we become liberated, we all join the big ocean again, right? So that's why we feel isolated right now. From a Buddhist point of view, what is that ocean? Right? It's a beautiful idea, but honestly, there's this mind and there's everyone else's mind, and that is just labeled. But learning about these non-Buddhist schools I found so helpful because I recognized my own innate views, some of them very wrong, and I understood why the Buddha spent that much time on it. So it's very, very helpful to learn the context within the Buddha taught and to be in awe of the sophisticated philosophical systems that existed in India, when at that time Germans still lived in caves basically and could hardly speak. Right? Honestly, I mean, Germany doesn't go way back, not that back. So this incredible ancient culture that His Holiness is so much emphasizing, saying, you guys go back to everything, don't copy the West, look at your own culture and discover a wealth that is unbelievable. Right? His Holiness the Dalai Lama always emphasizes that. Anyway, going back to the sense of the self, when the Buddha came, it was the perfect time. In that people had that strong view of Atman. There's Atman, there's a self. And so what did the Buddha say? Anatman. No self. Whoa, that was pretty revolutionary. So what kind of self was that? Now the Buddha himself, of course, everyone had a slightly different view. There were all these different philosophical systems all over India. So everyone had a slightly different interpretation of that. Now, it's not about accuracy and like to get it totally right. It's not about that. It's not about convincing anyone who's not a Buddhist that their view is wrong. No, it's not about converting someone to Buddhism. It's about understanding the idea of no self better. So there was a summary of the non-Buddhist view. It was summarized by the Buddha by saying, basically, everyone who believes in a self believes that self to be permanent, partless, and independent. What does that mean? Permanent is easy. We already discovered within ourselves, I guess, that we also have a sense of permanence in that I feel I'm the same person I was an hour ago. It's the same self. It's the same self that came into this room. it's the it's the same self that is talking to you right now. That is a sense of permanence, because if the self a few hours ago is the same as now, it would be permanent. That's pretty easy. But then, what about the remaining explanations? No parts. Well, that's very interesting. First of all, the reason for establishing that self that needs to be understood is that philosophers and experts and practitioners at that time, non-Buddhist ones, did believe, or not just believe, they were convinced of reincarnation. They were convinced of reincarnation. So the question was, what is reincarnated? Very important question. What is it that moves from one life to the next? So the person, they felt, though, they were convinced the mind doesn't continue. How could the mind continue? Because you don't remember anything you've learned. So the mind, they were convinced that the mind doesn't go from one life to the next. Because if the mind continued, you would still remember what you did. You could still talk, you could still write and read, because every ability, the ability to write and read comes from the mind. Of course, the brain is part of that as well. But if the mind didn't learn that, the brain couldn't know it as well. The mind didn't learn that. Well, the brain couldn't form in the right way. Plus, we couldn't do it. Yeah? Without the mind, you can't learn to read and write, etc. But when the person is reborn, they can't read and write. So it couldn't be the mind. That was their logic. The body certainly is not reincarnated. So there must be a self that can be disconnected from, that doesn't exist in dependence on mind and body. So independent. So it doesn't depend on mind and body, because it can go on with mind and body left behind. Plus, it couldn't have any parts. It couldn't have any parts, because the only parts the self has is like the mental parts and the physical parts. And since they are left behind, it must be partless. Unitary, I don't think, is a good translation, because it means something else. Partless, it means chame in Tibetan. Cha means part, me means no, less, no parts.
Yeah, but unitary is used as having no parts. But they don't.
Yeah, I know. I know it's used that way. So of course they explain it in the same way. But if you hear the word unitary for the first time, that's not what comes to mind. So I think partless is maybe not as elegant, but you won't forget what it refers to, and you know right from the beginning what it means. So that's why I prefer to use the word. I know people like to use permanent, unitary, and autonomous. Autonomous is also a bit of a, it's independent, right? Wait, let me think. Da chik rawangchen. Yeah, rawangchen means independent. Rawang in Tibetan means, Tibetan freedom for Tibet is rawang. So rawangchen means independent. Okay, anyway, so therefore, it's a self that goes from one life to the next. It leaves behind mind and body, so mind and body cannot be its parts. There are no other parts, really, so they wouldn't say the permanence is a part of it. They don't really see it that way. So it has no physical or mental parts, let's put it that way. It's partless in that way. It has the characteristic of being permanent, but not parts in the sense like a physical part or a mental part, because it moves on without these. Okay, and that is called the self. If you heard this for the first time, if I were to tell you there's a Buddhist view and I explain it well, you would believe that, right? It kind of makes sense, like a pea in a pot. The self is like a pea in a pot. Pot is the body. Pea, you can take it out and move on to the next life, like a pea in a pot. Yeah? So that was the view of self. And sometimes it feels that way, doesn't it? The self is the one somewhere in that mind and body right now, but it's separate. Yeah, so it may feel like, well, it usually feels that they're interconnected, so it's really hard to think it's independent. But the way we think of the I actually would have to be independent of mind and body. Even though we don't believe that they're totally disconnected, but the way we think of it, it would follow. If it existed that way, it would follow that it exists independently. So it's a very interesting idea. A permanent, partless, independent self. It's mentioned in the philosophical texts. Does that make sense? Do you get a sense that, I mean, and does that make sense? Means, does that self, do you understand that idea of the self? Okay. So the Buddhists and the non-Buddhists, they had that disagreement. Atman versus Anatman. Yeah? That was revolutionary. In the time of the Buddha, no one ever taught no self. It was pretty, and that's why some people didn't like Buddhism. They thought they had fallen into the extreme of nihilism, of course. But it also started a whole debate now between these different schools. Anyway, but the Buddha was definitely the only person who taught this. All right. Okay, so that was that. So permanent partners, independent self. Now this is actually, if you believe in a permanent partners, independent self, we don't innately believe in that. We still see there's a connection perceived, but there's an intellectually acquired view that we may acquire. But what is interesting, a lot of the Western views when it comes to the self are similar. I grew up in believing in a soul. And my grandmother, my mom's mom, she was very religious, and I would sometimes spend time with her, like during vacation time, I'd just be with her. So me and my sister, but usually at different times. And I'd stay with my mom in her bed. My grandfather, he passed away before I was born, so it was his bed I was sleeping in, but it was like a king-size bed. And I remember above that bed was a picture of Jesus, or was it Mary? I think it was Jesus. I think it was Jesus, doing something like that, I forget. And the soul was like the heart of Jesus and had little wings. That was said to be the soul. You always have that heart with the wings. And I kind of learned, I guess from my grandmother, that my soul is like a heart-shaped thing with wings. And so when you die, that heart-shaped thing goes to heaven, if you did everything right. Otherwise it goes to hell. 2 options, only 2 ways to go. So that was my sense of soul. That was my essence, and I thought of myself as that heart-shaped thing, I guess from the painting, or whatever. Maybe my grandmother, I never really discussed it, but I'm pretty sure my grandmother, I must have asked, does that really exist? Is that my soul? And she didn't know what else to say, and probably said yes. So in my mind, that was my soul. Of course, as I grew older, things changed, I was like, rubbish, but I still believed in a soul. So very interesting. And then you have that's also intellectually acquired. I wasn't born with that, but I had the sense there's a self there, so it could be that thing that leaves mind and body when I die. Kind of that idea, right? Does that sound familiar, like from your own upbringing possibly? Yeah. And then there's, of course, for instance, Freud. Freud talks about an ego and a superego. So the 2 types.
Ego and superego.
Yeah, ego and superego.
Id too. Id.
Huh?
Id, ego, superego.
Oh, 3.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Id is the animalistic instinct.
Ah,
It's the aggression.
so the instinctive,
Yes.
then the ego, and then the subconscious, the superego. Wow, I mean, add some complication. 3 Atman. Ek, do, tin. Atman, tin. Tin Atman. Oh my God, my Hindi. Right, you have like 3. So the thing is, not only talk about complication, but there's this belief intellectually acquired that there are 3 types. Oh, I have to look these up. I always thought it was 2. Okay, great. So it's time for tea. I just saw it. Time for tea. Okay. Pardon? 3:40. Let's meet again.